In today's video, we have substantial news on the NHL waiver wire featuring Jacob Vrana of the Detroit Red Wings. Plus, we're also taking a look at some trade talk involving the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Vancouver Canucks, and the San Jose Sharks. Plus, we have some updates from the World Junior Championships, another signing, and more. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have some pretty substantial news today. I want to get started with the news from the NHL waiver wire. The Detroit Red Wings have placed forward Jacob Vrana on waivers. This is kind of sending shockwaves through the NHL. This is very surprising news. Of course, most of you are probably aware because we've talked about it here on the channel, or you probably heard it elsewhere as well. Vrana recently went through the player assistance program. He's been away from the Red Wings team for an extended time. He's only appeared in 2 games this year where he has recorded 2 points, but then he left the team for this program. Been gone since. Recently was released from the program. It was placed in the minors on a conditioning stint. Now those games in the minors doesn't, at least on paper, of course I haven't watched him play, but the stat lines don't look pretty. In 3 games played, he's at 0 points and he's a -5. So, you would think that he's not playing well offensively, and obviously the defensive side of the game doesn't look great either. So clearly it sounds here like there's a bit of a disconnect between the player and the team. I would not think that he would require to be, on waivers. But here's the kind of the moral of the story. There's got to be more to this than just making a roster spot, because the Red Wings did need to do that as well. They have Robby Fabbri returning from injury tonight. So we knew going into this, like I mentioned a number of times, that the Red Wings were going to be a team to watch, because we are going to need to see them open up a roster spot, maybe a couple here as the days go on, because of returning players from injuries. And I was thinking that perhaps where they have 3 active goaltenders, that might be the path of least resistance here. We might see them make a move in that regard, but this is not the path they've gone down because of the developments with Vrana. So there is need from a roster perspective. Based on what is being said around the NHL, it sounds like the Red Wings and Yzerman, the GM, would like to probably keep Vrana in the minors a little bit longer. I would say that it's probably fair. This is just a bit of a guess on my part, that things have not gone well and they think he needs more time to be in the minors before making an NHL comeback. And clearly there seems to be, like I said, a difference of opinion. Now, the other interesting part of this, it looks like Vrana might be completely done with Detroit. He has removed all reference of the Red Wings on all of his social media. So that's usually a telling tale. When players do that, that there's obviously major issues in the relationship, and it's probably not going to be resolved. It's not usual common thing you see in that regard. So to me, I would think that maybe Vrana gets picked up. He's making $5.25 million for this year and next. That extra year might be problematic for some. Looking around the NHL, there's not a ton of teams that have a lot of cap space. Half the league is tapped out, so you're really going to end up being some of your lower ranking teams are the ones that are kind of rebuilding, that have more space that way. Of course, some might have a little bit of LTIR space, etc., but it's going to be tough based on the contract for a lot of teams to make this work. Now, typically and historically speaking, Vrana has been a pretty consistent player. He's got good speed. Scoring goals is certainly his knack. But at the same time, he also has a history of getting hurt a lot. And, obviously, after being away for an extended time due to the player assistance program, you don't want to have a player that's not ready to be in your lineup. Essentially, you want a player, if you're going to be paying this kind of money, having them on your cap hit and on your roster, you want him to be able to live up to the hype and to live up to the contract. And obviously the Red Wings feel like he may not be in a position to do that. So it's going to be very interesting here. I would imagine in the next number of hours or days, we're going to probably hear more of an inside scoop from NHL insiders, kind of talking with the backside of the story of what might be going on behind the scenes here. But there's certainly more to this. I would think a lot of teams are going to take a long, hard look at Vrana. That extra year of the contract and the fact he hasn't played in a while might be problematic. I know there's lots of fans out there screaming for their favorite team's GM to pick this guy up right away because he's the free player who can score. I get that, but there could be other things that we don't know. And is he ready to be that player he used to be right now? We don't know that either. So stay tuned. This is certainly a very interesting development in Detroit that we need to pay close attention to and see where things go. But Vrana being on waivers certainly was not something we expected today. and it's going to be a developing story, I think, here, at least for the next 24 hours while we wait for the waiver decision to come through, and then the outcome of what happens next if he is picked up or not from there. So stay tuned. More to come, I'm sure. We have a pretty decent signing in St. Louis. They've made an extension here for young goaltender Joel Hoffer, 22-year-old goalie, 2018 draft pick. Probably fair to say that Hoffer is the most likely goaltender of the future with the Blues. Of course, he gets a 2-year extension at $775,000, which is really, to me, a phenomenal deal. That tells me I wouldn't be shocked, to be honest, if he's the backup in St. Louis as early as next season. Of course, right now they have a tandem of Jordan Binnington and Thomas Greiss. Greiss is only on a 1-year deal, so he's expiring. So he's a UFA. I would think that they probably move on in that respect. Hofer gives them an opportunity for him to develop, and it really helps out their cap situation, having their backup goalie on such a favorable contract. So to me, I think that that's probably where they're heading. Hofer will eventually challenge Binnington, I do believe, to be the starting goaltender. He was a goaltender that, like I said, was drafted with a lot of pedigree, has had good development. He has really solid American Hockey League stats since he's been in the American Hockey League the last couple of years, couple solid seasons down there. He's played with Team Canada before at the World Juniors. Like, he is a real solid goaltender. So it'll be interesting to see how the NHL level treats him and how things go. But it very well could be a very, team-friendly contract for the next couple seasons as they adjust their goaltending needs. And I said the St. Louis Blues are going to be a very interesting team to watch over the next couple of months as we approach the deadline and potential significant changes going on in that organization. A handful of players have been activated to return to NHL action, which we'll see here. The Avalanche have activated Darren Helm. The Flyers have brought back Bobby Brink off IR, so that's big for Brink to get going. And the Ottawa Senators have activated defenseman Eric Brandstrom, has been out for a while. He's back, so they have put Jacob Bernard-Docker back to the American Hockey League as well. So Bernard-Docker likely will be getting more of an opportunity soon, I would think. They still have Nikita Zaitsev injured. Just kind of depends right now. I guess they're content with Nick Holden being that number 6 defenseman. So we'll see where things go. But Brandstrom returns for the Senators tonight. Some World Junior action updates. We had a really solid quarterfinals day yesterday. It was the end of the games for the Moncton portion of the tournament. Halifax will get the remaining semifinals and finals playoff games, but it was a real solid day. Of course, we had 4 quarterfinals. Austria and Latvia were the 2 teams eliminated from the playoff round. They're playing in a relegation best 2 out of 3 series, with Latvia winning the first game, so they have to win one more to clinch their spot to remain in the top group. And if whatever team loses will be relegated to the lower level World Junior Tournament, and the team that won the previous tournament in that level will get to move up into next year's action. But the first game of the day was Sweden against Finland. To be honest, the Finns dominated the first period for sure. Probably most of the second period as well, I think it's fair to say. They had a 2-1 lead, and then late in the third, Sweden finally came on. We saw a couple of goals from draft-eligible prospect Leo Carlson. They tied it up and then scored a shorthanded goal to win it. Both late goals to pull ahead, stun Finland, and pull off a 3-2 victory. So Finland's tournament is over. Sweden will advance to the semifinals. But it was a heck of a game. Like I said, pretty solid game from Finland. Wasn't overly eventful. It was one-sided for a big chunk of it. But the Swedes came through when it mattered most, and the draft-eligible prospect Leo Carlson led the way there at the end of their captain getting the winning goal. We saw the U.S. team absolutely obliterate the Germans 11-1. Not even close in that right for that quarterfinal. Coyotes prospect Logan Cooley led the way with a hat trick. Preds defenseman prospect Ryan Ufko got 5 assists, so they were the leading point getters and contributors there for the Americans, but obviously an 11-1 scorer. There was all kinds of contributors in that regard. Czechia continues to have an outstanding tournament. Very surprising. I mean, I knew they were going to be a decent team, not going to be a pushover by any means, but I think they kind of surprised a lot of people with just how good they are. They had a really good record coming out of the round-robin portion of the tournament. So did Switzerland. Switzerland picked up 3 wins, all in extra time, but still that's a solid finish for them. But Czechia absolutely dominated Switzerland 9-1. Now, Switzerland actually got the first goal of the game. I believe it was in the first minute or so of play. Complete turnover and just fluky thing from Chechia. The puck ended up down there, and the goalie could have come out to grab it, did not. Switz goes in and scores 1-0 early, but then Chechia got their act together, and it was just complete domination from there. Sabres prospect Jerard Fagerberg led the way with a 4-point game, but Chechia is a real force this year, and certainly going to be a force again in the semifinals. And the final game of the night featured Team Canada against the Slovaks. The Slovaks put up one heck of a fight. They would not go away. Canada, for the most part, dominated the play, had a lopsided edge in shots on goal, but the Slovakian team took advantage of the few opportunities they got, came back in the third period to tie things up 3-3 and force overtime, which we saw a pretty entertaining overtime period. We saw a penalty call to the Slovakian team in overtime as well. And the Connor Bedard show continues. Obviously, by far Canada's best player, breaking all kinds of records. Bedard scores a crazy overtime goal, basically a triple deke move going around two players plus the goalie to get it in the net to win the game for Canada. Certainly, like I said, he's broken all kinds of Team Canada records, and now he's going to see what the games or whatever time he's got left here to see if he can start breaking a few more tournament records as well. But he's now the all-time leading scorer in the tournament for Team Canada in its history, points and all that. It's crazy. This guy is so good. Teams, I think, what are taking notice in the NHL, it might just adjust their ability to tank, because I tell you, this kid to me is going to be the top first overall pick since Connor McDavid, in my opinion. He is that good. He's not the exact same player as McDavid. To me, he's got some similarities, but he's also got some similarities of a few other players as well. I would even throw in a little Mitch Marner, little Nikita Kucherov. Like, this kid can, he's not as fast as McDavid, but he's got really good hands. He's got a wicked shot. So, for example, take the skating and the finesse of Marner and add the shot of Matthews, combine those together. That might get you close to what we have here, but he's a phenomenal player. Arguably, like I said, the best first overall pick that we're going to see. He's going to be a generational type player, in my opinion. He's just so special and led the way for Canada once again. Now, onto the trade section of the video. I want to start with Vancouver. Vancouver is a hot topic here again today. JT Miller spoke to the media, made some quotes that just kind of, to me, completely surprised me. I mean, to me, JT Miller is not dealing with reality. I mean, of course, he was talked about his lack of production. He talked about the team's lack of success. He talked about his effort, you could say, to be a better 200-foot player this year, playing better on the defensive side of the puck. And one of his quotes says that he'd like to say that his lack of production is a compliment to me not cheating the game and playing the right way. I really wouldn't think his teammates would agree with him on that. Of course, we saw the incident the other night, banging his stick on the net, telling the goaltender to get the F out of the net when the goalie was waiting for the coach's instruction to do so. To me, as time goes on, JT Miller's looking more and more like a real toxic teammate. He walks around with an A on his jersey. To me, that's not leadership, the way this guy conducts himself on the ice. And there's been too many incidents to call it a one-off or a bad day or anything of that nature. To me, if I'm Vancouver, I'm regretting that signing Miller. And I think that they made a big mistake here. They're going to end up losing Captain Bo Horvat because of this. I mean, Horvat is more of a leader on the Canucks team. It's just, if I had to pick who I'm keeping, there's no question I'm keeping Horvat all day, every day. But then Miller's signing has made it not impossible, but difficult, very difficult, in fact, to sign Bo Horvat. But I do wonder, with all these incidents lately, will Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford have a change of heart and try to trade Miller to create the room to keep Horvat? You got to wonder if something's going on through their minds here, because to me, at the end of the day, Miller, it seems like he's becoming a toxic dictator in that locker room. And the way he commands himself is just ridiculous. I mean, seen lots of quotes from Vancouver media today talking around different people. They're saying that essentially when the Canucks had other more prominent leaders around, like Chris Tanev, Jacob Markstrom and a few others, that he was not the same kind of player. But now that a lot of those other older veterans have moved out, he's kind of taken over the reins. And even though he's not the captain, he basically acts like it. And like I said, he kind of has become, to me, like he just looks like a real toxic teammate. That's just my take, my personal opinion based on what we see of Miller. I mean, even when he was asked about the situation with the goaltender and what he said to yelling on the ice, banging the stick to get the F off the ice, he said he didn't even understand what the big deal was. Like, to me, if you're yelling at your teammates on the ice like that, I don't understand how you could not expect it to be brought up in the media. Like, I mean, like I said, I don't think he's dealing with reality a whole lot, but I do got to wonder if Rutherford and Alvin are going to have a change of heart. He has a no-move clause, but it was not backdated. It does not kick in until the free agent period this coming summer in 2023. So they could trade him tomorrow without having his permission or consent at all. So certainly, there was a lot of interest in Miller in the offseason. I'm sure right now that some teams, even if they wanted to consider it and seeing what he's been going through, both production-wise and attitude-wise, might have some, red flags there, and they might be a little more hesitant to pull the trigger than they were back in, say, August or July. But at the same time, you got to wonder if they're going to try. Because at the same time, I also think that Bo Horvat is a player you don't want to lose. But ultimately, all the NHL insiders have reported that Horvat is basically as good as gone, because there's no way the Canucks are going to meet the demands of his contract that he's looking for, because after they paid Miller, they just can't afford to do that, and they'll lose all cap flexibility. They're going to have a lot of other issues in their hands if they try to sign Horvat, and it's just going to really be complicated here. But at the same time, something's got to give. So to me, I'd like to know what everybody thinks about the JT Miller antics, and what the Canucks should do here. But to me, should they make a swerve here and try to keep Horvat by trading Miller? I really think it's something they really need to seriously consider. Now, there's also reports today from Frank Zaravalli of DailyFaceoff.com reporting that Sharks defenseman and prospect, I guess he's still kind of a prospect, Ryan Merkley, who was a first-round pick in the 2018 NHL draft, has officially requested a trade from the Sharks, citing that a lack of opportunity, basically, and a fresh start somewhere else might be best what's needed for him to elevate his career. I think he's kind of tired of not getting a consistent NHL opportunity and wants to get on a team where that could happen. Now, of course, many of you may or may not remember, but Merkley was a very, what's the best word to describe him? Controversial, I guess you could say, first-round pick in 2018. Many that know prospects extremely well and have watched Merkley through his young career would argue that he was probably a top 5 talent in that draft, but he dropped because of a lot of issues around his attitude, and just how he carried himself. He got suspended a few times in junior for some, unprofessional things, and just there was a lot of other growing up that he needed to do, so to speak. Now, since he's been in the AHL and NHL, I haven't seen any stories reported about there being issues in that regard, so I don't know that that's really playing a role anymore. I think it's always going to be something that's probably discussed for part of his development in his career, but I can't say with any certainty that it's causing any issues for him now. But at this point in his career, he's appeared in 39 NHL games. He's put up 6 points, but he has appeared in 93 American Hockey League games spread out over a couple of years with 44 points. So his AHL production is pretty decent. Of course, the Sharks do have some long-term contracts on the back end there as well. When you have Carlson, of course, Burns is not there now, but had been for the bulk of Merkley's time. You get Vlasic, you get Mario Ferraro, and a few others. So certainly I understand why there's not a ton of opportunity there right now for Merkley. So I'm not sure where he could possibly end up. There's been no link or any specific teams that's been rumored to be moving, making a trade for him or anything of that nature. But be interesting to see if he is moved. Maybe they'll try to find another prospect that needs a fresh start and do a clean swap. We'll see. But a young defenseman that might be easily up for grabs by another squad. Now, staying with the Sharks, Elliot Friedman has recently linked a Sharks forward possibly to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, he said on a recent podcast that essentially that he believes at one point the Maple Leafs' top priority earlier this year was to replace Muzzin on the blue line with a gritty defenseman. But now, after getting through a bigger chunk of the season, their defense has been, obviously dealt with a lot of injuries, but I think they're relatively content with the personnel that they have. That their bigger top priority would be to add at the deadline in a top 6 forward role and suggest Timo Meier being a great target of theirs. Now, keep in mind, I know a lot of you are probably looking at Meier and saying, well, long term they could not make it work. And I agree they couldn't. But remember, Timo Meier is still going to be a restricted free agent for another season. So this is a unique situation, though. Typically, when teams acquire a younger 20-something RFA, their objective is to sign him long term to keep him. Now, that's usually what you see, like Alex DeBrincat going to Ottawa at the draft. Certainly a big part of that. Ottawa's intention, even though it hasn't happened yet, definitely to sign him long term, and they can make that happen and make it work, no doubt. However, in this case, where he has one more year remaining, certainly has a $10 million qualifying offer that comes with that contract. That's going to be a tough pill to swallow for any team. Now, it doesn't mean they couldn't negotiate with him and try to get terms agreed to for a lesser amount. And that very well could happen regardless of where he ends up. But because of that $10 million QO and because of the timing of the deadline and everything, there's a lot of speculation that he might be a unique circumstance this year and be a restricted free agent that is only used as a rental player. So certainly you could decide not to extend that $10 million QO in the offseason, make him an unrestricted free agent a year early, and then he moves on. You had him for your time as a rental player, and that's it. Now, of course, I guess depending on where he ends up going, they're probably not going to want to pay a huge price to use him as a rental, but because he is young and still a highly sought-after goal-scoring winger, I wonder what the price tag would be out of San Jose. But I do know that based on reports here that the Leafs prefer not to trade prospect Matthew Nyes. They would also prefer not to trade their first-round pick. Now, they may not have a choice but to move that pick if it really boils down to it here. But at the same time, like I said before, I think this is a pivotal year for Toronto. They need to make progress in the playoffs, and they have to win at least a couple rounds, or they could be in danger of maybe losing Austin Matthews. This is, next year is Matthews' last year of his contract, and to make sure he wants to re-up for another long-term deal, obviously he's going to be commanding even more money. Rumor has it he's going to want around $15 million. We'll have to wait and see if there's any truth to that. But obviously it's a situation where, they're going to want to make him happy. They need to win and show progress. And I think a guy like Meier very much could make that happen. But it's going to be tricky. I'm not personally convinced that it's the absolute best fit out there, given the fact that it could be a big price tag for a rental player. Whereas other teams might make a better pitch to the Sharks about trading for Meier and getting him signed because they'd have more flexibility to do that. So we'll have to wait and see. But it will be one of many players I'm sure that the Leafs are going to consider. And I'm sure they are going to do something substantial, just a matter of what that player ends up being and when it gets done. But let me know, do you think Timo Meier should be a top target for the Toronto Maple Leafs ahead of the March of 2023 NHL trade deadline? Let me know your thoughts and all that and all the other news discussed here today. Down in the comments, we'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.